Hello, my name is Tremaine, and I'm a member of SOS at RVC. I'm going to talk to you today about physical resilience. You are physically resilient if you don't sit still longer than an hour at a time. You keep moving, especially when you don't feel like it. The temptation to sit on the couch or to nurse a pain by not moving is high. A physically resilient person works out the kinks and makes physical activity a priority.
All right, so I want to thank both of you for coming today. Noah Currier from Oscar Mike and Steve Wong from Rock Valley College Business Department. And I wanted to start today by taking us back and introducing the two of our relationship to Steve and anybody else, because I don't think people know that our relationship and our history goes back a long time. Yeah. So do you want to tell Steve how long we've known each other and how we met?
Yeah, I was probably close to 10 years old.
Yes.
And Amanda was my nanny.
Yes.
She practically lived with me. She's been a big sister to me for years and years. At the time, she was a high school basketball stud, and I was learning the game of basketball, so she used to be able to block all my shots in the driveway, stuff like that. But yeah, I've known her for a long time.
Yes, and I remember the day you used to come into Boone County Restaurant all the time. Your dad would bring you in, sometimes your mom, a lot of times your dad when your mom was working. And your dad looked at me and he said, "How much do you make here?" And I had to figure out, okay, well, how much do I make? And I figured it out, what my tips would be, what my hourly wages is. And he said, okay, well, I want you to quit this job and come be a nanny for my kids. And that's how I started. Yeah. That's how I started. And your family became a huge saving grace in my life at the time. I was actually going to Rock Valley College at the time. And I would work on papers on your mom's computer. Your mom and I would talk about Tony Robbins, and she introduced me to a lot of the things I still listen to today, and I fell in love with you and your family, so yeah. So then, flash forward, and you go into the military, and we kind of separate our lives, right? We start our lives, and then kind of take us through your journey and going through the military and how that led you to Oscar Mike.
Well, I left for boot camp in the year 2000. We hadn't been to war in 9 years. Didn't seem like there was anything on the horizon. And then about a year into my enlistment, September 11th happened. I found myself loading stuff on a ship a couple days later. Did a deployment over in the Middle East, but never really got off the ships. It was still a little too fresh, I think, for us to have done anything there, and didn't really have a mission in place. So that deployment was just about a year of sitting on a ship, and then came home for a couple months, went back overseas. This time I ended up in Kuwait, and March 19th, 2003, my unit led the invasion of Iraq. And then I came home without a scratch on me from that deployment in Iraq. 3 days later, a guy fell asleep at the wheel. I was in a bad car accident, rolled down a hill about a dozen times, broke my neck in the accident, came home after 6 months in a hospital, and then some other tragic stuff happened, and I went down a pretty dark path for a while. And then I went to an adaptive sporting event.
What year was that?
It was 2010-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, I think 2010 was my first one. And then that was a game changer for me because I went skiing in Colorado, and I did something that I never thought I would ever do as a quadriplegic. I felt alive. I felt adrenaline. I was seeing the most beautiful thing I had ever seen up there from the top of the mountain in Aspen. And when I got back, I signed up for the National Veteran Wheelchair Games. I signed up for classes at Rock Valley, and then I went skydiving like right when it got warm enough. And I think those things combined just completely changed my trajectory. I found a piece of myself again, and I started having goals and a new mission and purpose, and like all those things you need to feel alive.
So a couple of things. You said you went to Aspen, you came home, you had a renewed sense of purpose, and you had a drive again, you felt alive, and you started classes at Rock Valley. So Steve Wong comes into the picture. What do you remember about taking classes with Steve Wong at Rock Valley College?
At the time, it was really cool because when I got involved in adaptive sports, I was meeting all these injured veterans who cited an adaptive sport as that catalyst to change their trajectory. And when I started classes at Rock Valley, I was actually pretty scared to take them because I didn't know how I'd get around campus. I didn't know how I'd hold a pen. I didn't know, I didn't have all these things I didn't have figured out, and I was scared. And I started taking classes here, and at the same time that I wanted to start this nonprofit and the apparel company, and the business classes and working with Steve, what was cool is he knew what I was doing, and he knew the project that I was working on, so we got to involve a lot of that in our discussions in class, and we got to, like, real time, if I was trying to figure out what a marketing plan would be to launch this thing, we were able to incorporate that into the classroom sometimes, or I was able to ask questions that were relevant to the exact thing that I was doing at the time. And he was a huge help in kind of guiding me on where I should go from there.
Did you call that project Oscar Mike?
Yep.
Wow. Okay, so Oscar Mike started at Rock Valley College. What do you remember, Steve? What do you remember about Noah in that project?
First of all, let me say that I'm humbled by the fact that you still remember me, and you made some really good, nice comments about what I did. And it's I remember sitting. He was sitting to my right side, towards the front, and he was always a good student, participating and volunteering answers, etc. Not necessarily all the right answers, but at least you volunteered and said something, right?
I do remember that. I think every time you asked something, my hand was in the air every time because I wanted to ask questions. I actually specifically remember we were doing, I don't know if it was a case study or what it was, where we were learning a lot about the Mall of America at the time. And, that actually led me on this really cool path to, I started looking into Mall of America. A friend of mine that I had met shortly after was I forget what his title was. He basically was in charge of laying out one of the departments of Sears at the time. I believe it was Sears, which was a huge flagship store at Mall of America. So it's just kind of cool how some of these things that we talked about in Rock Valley really led me to pursue all these different angles.
Well, you are a student who obviously listened, right? And you became proactive after learning things from that class, and that's good. And obviously, you've been very successful all these years.
So tell us about Oscar Mike.
Oscar Mike is two things. It's a nonprofit first. The mission is the reason that we started everything, which is to get injured veterans involved in adaptive sports. Now we help more than just injured veterans. We've actually helped quite a few civilians now. But the purpose was injured veterans on the move. Oscar Mike means on the move in radio jargon.
So going back to our story, Noah, you were injured in what year?
2003.
Exactly. And I found out I was pregnant in 2003, and I had to pick a name for my son. And I went back and forth with names, and I'm honored that my son shares your name.
I am more honored than you could ever even believe. When you told me that I've thought about that a million times and what that means, and it's unbelievable, and I am extremely honored.
Yeah.
And you are, like even though you're not blood, you're my sister.
Right.
I love you just like that.
Yep.
And when I heard that
Thank
story,
you.
I was overwhelmed. That's a great story. And to have Amanda to bring us together is quite remarkable as well, too. Not having seen you since 2011, that's quite a bit of time going past.
Yeah.
And to be and seeing you successful, that's great. And it just really makes me feel good that you've done it.
So Noah, the last thing I want to ask you is, for this pandemic and this project, people are suffering right now. What advice would you give people to stay Asker Mike like during the pandemic? So I know some of the events, you said, how many events have been canceled?
104 this year.
104 events have been canceled. So, well, like, what advice would you give to people that you care about in the community, the Asker Mike community? What advice would you give them to just stay Asker Mike?
Well, this whole topic of resiliency, one of the things you have to do is for yourself, you have to, no matter what, even if you were locked inside somewhere, like even if you're in a prison cell, you got to be doing push-ups. You got to write stuff down. You got to keep your body and your mind engaged, and keep thinking. Like when the spigot gets turned back on, what am I going to do? And what this is an unbelievable time to plan your next steps.
Yes.
This is one of the things that everybody can take away from this whole year is this gave everybody the ability to live inside their own heads for a while instead of giving everything they had to whatever it was. Maybe I think a lot of people even cut down their social media time, even though like they're a little bit more isolated than usual. I think we've spent a lot of time listening to the birds, watching the animals, and realizing that there's more to life than maybe we had even noticed before when we were so busy and consumed with regular life. That those realizations are going to give you a huge new drive. Like I'm excited to see what businesses start after
Me too.
this. I'm excited to see the art that comes out after this, the music that comes from this, and I mean even with everything involved. You think about what the '60s did for music and art and a revolution, and I mean I think that we're living in that right now.
I could not agree more. I told somebody I care about recently that if you're looking for leaders, now is the time to look for people in your organization that are not bowing out, but that are saying, how can we meet this obstacle with an opportunity? Because there's a ton of opportunities for innovation right now.
There are, and spend this time wisely. Do something positive for yourself, for your own mind and body, and what will come from that will end up being better than it would have before, where you were consumed with everybody else and everything else.
Amanda's 100% right. If you are a true leader, this is the time to be stepping up.
Yep.
All right, and make yourself known.
Yep.
Yeah.
No doubt.
And there are going to be we've lost a lot of businesses thanks to the pandemic, but we're going to see some new businesses open up as well too.
And they're going to be smarter and better, and they're going to have all of this to consider as they're planning it, which is going to prep us for the future even better.
Thank you so much for everybody who made RVC SOS's virtual event, second annual Friendsgiving, a smashing success. To the people that put videos together for us, to the students, to the co-advisors, to Jerry Labai and his team, we are so grateful. Please help us be the light.